which we've kind of neglected. We've been living in a very externally focused world for centuries.
Mm.
We've neglected the inner world. And that's one of the reasons why the world is in such a perilous state, because we've neglected the inner world. And, we've allowed our inner beings to become restless and discordant. And obviously that affects our relationships. It affects our behavior. It affects, how we treat the natural world.
Welcome to the Spiritual Quest podcast, a transformative journey where we step into a world of wonder and exploration, seeking answers to profound questions. Why am I here? What is my mission in life? And how can I make a positive impact in this world? Join me and my inspiring guests on a spiritual quest to fully embrace your uniqueness and speak your truth with grace and gratitude. I am your host, Vibeke Garnos, always guided by spirit. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another enlightening episode of the Spiritual Quest podcast. How would you describe this journey called life? An easy walk in the park or a thrilling roller coaster where 1 minute you're enjoying the view, then screaming your head off, maybe feeling a little dizzy, and you end up either laughing or crying so hard that tears are flowing. Many of us are looking for a way to get off this roller coaster and enjoy a tranquil walk in the park. And today's guest is offering us a roadmap to help us awaken and overcome our everyday life challenges. Steve Taylor has devoted his life to investigating spiritual awakening as a psychologist and spiritual explorer. And in his latest book, The Adventure, A Practical Guide to Spiritual Awakening, he shares step-by-step practices for cultivating spiritual awakening while posing a crucial question: can humans awaken through their own individual efforts? Steve Taylor is an author of many best-selling books and a senior lecturer in psychology at Leeds Beckett University. His books have been published in 20 languages, while his articles and essays have been published in over 100 academic journals, magazines, and newspapers. He regularly appears in the media in the UK, and Eckhart Tolle has described his work as an important contribution to the shift in consciousness which is happening on our planet at present. It's my pleasure to welcome Steve Taylor to the Spiritual Quest podcast.
Hello
Welcome,
there.
Steve. Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Quest podcast. How are
Great to
you?
meet you. I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
I was waiting for you to answer that. I didn't want to jump in. No, but before we get to discuss your book, your new book, and all the practical steps, for our spiritual awakening, I would love for you to share your personal story of awakening with us.
Well, I seem to, from a young age, certainly from 16 to 17 years old, I became aware of a kind of natural spirituality inside me. Even though I didn't understand it at the time, I would not have used the word spirituality to describe it. But in retrospect, I had a lot of spiritual experiences where I would feel a sense of oneness with my surroundings. Everything around me would become incredibly alive and beautiful, and a sense of harmony would fill the world around me. And it was these were kind of uplifting, euphoric feelings. But it was only when I was in my 20s I began to read books on spirituality and mysticism, and I thought, so these are the experiences I've been having. So I'm not crazy after all. I realized other people. Maybe I was crazy, but there were lots of other people, lots of other crazy people around, so I didn't feel alone in my craziness. So yeah, it gave me a framework to make sense of my spirituality, and so I kind of accepted myself and understood myself a lot better, and I began to, kind of integrate my natural spirituality into my daily life.
But how was your childhood? Did you have any religious beliefs or anything from that was
Not at all.
no?
No, my parents were completely irreligious. Apart from football, my dad was a massive football fan. That was his religion. So
Yes. You're from the UK, remember? So yeah, that's huge.
right. I'm from Manchester, so everybody in Manchester is a big football fan.
You're right.
Um,
Yeah.
So apart from that, there was no religion at all. And my parents didn't know anything about spirituality. So that's why, I found it really difficult to understand my own experiences.
So in your 20s, when you kind of started to understand that this, you're not crazy, this is something you've experienced, what did that lead to? I mean, you're a psychologist. Was that essential for you choosing that path or no?
It was, yeah, because I wanted to understand my own experiences. I didn't understand why these experiences will sometimes arise. Then they sort of go away again. And, maybe a couple of weeks later, I'd have another one of these experiences. So I wanted to understand, the cause of these experiences and what they meant. And I also wanted to understand, how common were these experiences? Did other people have spiritual experiences? Did ordinary people have them, or were they just confined to monks and mystics, or people
Mhm.
who followed regular spiritual traditions? So that's one of the reasons, probably the main reason why I became interested in psychology, because I wanted to understand, I wanted to investigate spirituality from a psychological perspective.
Yes. And I'm thinking from a personal point of view, I've always had a thin veil, if you wish. Like I've had mystical experiences. I've seen energy, or should I say, what people would refer to as ghosts, actually walk
Mm,
into the
mm,
room and stand in front of me. And so knowing what you're saying, I've always been seeking kind of the human understanding of what was going on, because like you're sharing here that you're there was something ignited within you as you were reading about other people's experiences as well, and that you kind of figured out that this is exactly what I'm experiencing. I can't be alone, and then going down that path. So what really inspired you to write all your books? We can get into the adventure later on. I just want to get a
mm,
sense of how you came together and the acceptance of everything.
mm. It wasn't really a conscious decision. I mean, I had a sense at the same time as I became aware of my innate spirituality. I also had an impulse to write. I was writing from the age of 16. I was writing poetry and stories and essays. And so by the time I was like 21, 22, I knew that I was going to be a writer. I knew that I wanted to be a writer. That was my role in the world.
So that was your
So
gift. So you kind of felt like that is why you today you know that that's part of why you are here to share your gift through writing books.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
And at a certain point, originally I was writing poetry and stories. Then I realized that my interest in spirituality should merge with my impulse for writing, and I should write about spirituality and psychology. So that was in my late 20s. And as soon as I did that, I thought, yeah, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to write about psychology and spirituality
Hmm.
and poetry. I still write poetry now. But
I
yeah,
would
as soon as I
love for
did
you,
that,
yeah. I would love for you to elaborate on the poetry, because to me, reading poetry, it's like getting into somebody's soul. It's like a
mm,
really, and it really connects me through oneness, my experience of oneness, like connectedness when I'm
yeah,
reading and it's making sense on such a deep level. So, doing this as a child or growing up, how did that? I'm not even trying to, I can't even find the right question when I'm asking that, because I know it's a natural state that you're allowing, but was
mm.
something present in your life that gave you that space to allow it, or was it just flowing through you?
It just flowed through me, and I began to enjoy reading other people's poetry. Even at school, I enjoyed reading poetry. Even in England, we have to do lots of Shakespeare. Even all the kids were bored with Shakespeare. I really loved Shakespeare, even though it was quite difficult to understand. So I loved reading poetry, and at a certain point, it felt natural for me to write it as well. And it's very important to me because I often write about other people's spiritual experiences, but poetry for me is an expression of my own spiritual experiences.
Ah, there you go. I was looking for that. So that's kind of your
Mm,
soul voice coming forward. That's
yeah.
when you're authentic or pure in your essence. Otherwise, you're using your intellect in more to describe or share other people's stories. Am I getting
Yeah,
that correct? Yeah.
to an extent. I mean, I think my soul expresses itself in my books as well,
Yeah.
but it expresses itself most directly, most purely in my poetry.
Yes, because it's no restrictions, right? It's just the flow of. what's
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
forward.
I love poetry because it's so spontaneous. You can never decide. You can never wake up in the morning and think, "Okay, today I'm gonna write a poem today." It never happens like that. You have to
You're
wait.
right. Yes. That's why it's fascinating. I love poetry. It's just, yeah, it's a glimpse into the soul. And it really does open your heart if you're in that. But like I said, when I read poetry, I have to be in a state of mind that allows me to be present in a whole different way than when I'm out there
Yeah.
or I can't just listen to it. I love listening to audiobooks. I'm very auditive. So I love getting it that way. But listening to poetry, I can't be doing other stuff. I can listen to a book, but I have to sit down. It's
Mm.
kind of like sacred. It feels very sacred
Yeah.
to me.
Well, there is a strong connection between spirituality and poetry. That's why so many poets are, spiritually awakened people. So many gurus have written poetry. So many spiritual texts are written in a poetic form. I think it's because you have to be poetry puts you in a slightly meditative state.
Yes.
If you have to slow down and you have to kind of disengage your intellect and just allow the words to seep into you. So
Mm,
it can become a kind of spiritual practice in itself.
yes. Okay. Well, that's beautiful. I love that. I haven't read any of your poems, but I definitely will. So I will seek them out. Okay.
Yeah,
So
there
in
are some
yeah.
of them in the adventure. There are about I include about 12 poems or something like that in the adventure.
Oh, okay. That's going to be interesting to read. I love poetry, as I said. Um, um, there's another question that I have when it comes to being pure in your essence when you are writing. Like you said, you are a facilitator of other people's stories or you're sharing those, but you are also a higher consciousness framing it to in a book, if you wish, like you're bringing it forward into a context that are readable for people. How do you discover, is it easy for you to bring or find the steps to put it into word, into a
Mm,
context? Because it's such a, for me it's such a natural state. It's just if you're tuning into your heart and you're allowing yourself to be guided by
mm.
your own spirit or making
Yeah.
decisions from the heart, it's natural. So how, elaborate on that.
It is a kind of channeling. Even when I write, I mean, certainly poetry feels like channeling. You know, I could be going for a walk or a run, or I could be meditating, and some lines will come into my head, and I think, oh, that's a poem. Well, that's the beginning of a poem, or the idea for a poem will come into my mind. But it's the same with my other books. Even though they are, some of them they may seem sort of very carefully structured and very carefully written. It's actually quite spontaneous. It is a kind of channeling. So I never really plan what I'm going to write. I never think, okay, what shall my next book be about? What am I going to write about next? I just wait for it to form inside me, and at a certain
Mm,
point, I think, okay, I'm ready to write this book. It's ready to emerge from inside me.
I
So I
love
feel like
that.
my book's kind of that. I mean, it's a kind of slightly trite analogy, but it's a bit like pregnancy. It's like something is forming within me, and, and it's slowly emerging. It's waiting to be born, and at a certain point, I allow it to be born, and
Mm,
then it's very easy when I'm writing. A lot of the time, it's very easy. It's a kind of flow state where I just allow it to come through me. It doesn't. I don't feel like it comes from me. It comes through me.
I love that. Yeah. Well, in the introduction of your book, I'm going to read something that you wrote, okay? And it's you say that awakening is the greatest adventure we can undertake as human beings. It's a voyage of discovery that reveals exhilarating beauty and richness, but may also expose us to challenges. The essential principle is that to cultivate these individual characteristics means to cultivate wakefulness itself as an overall state. Ooh, you got to elaborate. Help us understand.
Well, Well, I also say in the book that we've reached a certain point in history where the external world is pretty much explored. There are no parts of the world which are undiscovered. We've even traveled into space. We've discovered you know everything. The oceans have been just, explored as well. So the external world is kind of like it's been used up now. But so now it's the right time for us to take the inner journey. The only place for us left to go is to go inside ourselves and explore our own beings, and to begin the inner adventure, and to begin to explore the terra incognita within ourselves. So that's the great adventure. The great adventure is inner exploration, which we've kind of neglected. We've been living in a very externally focused world for centuries.
Mm.
We've neglected the inner world. And that's one of the reasons why the world is in such a perilous state, because we've neglected the inner world. And, we've allowed our inner beings to become restless and discordant. And obviously that affects our relationships. It affects our behavior. It affects, how we treat the natural world and so on. So we need to, undergo the inner adventure in order to create harmony between the inner and the outer world, to create a kind of balance between the inner and the outer world.
Mm.
And by the qualities of wakefulness, I mean that over the years, I've interviewed hundreds of people who've undergone spiritual awakening, and I've had my own experiences. I've read most of the world's great spiritual texts and explored many traditions. So I focus on a number of qualities which all of these traditions and all of the people who've undergone awakening, which they all focus on, they all emphasize. So I suggest that if we cultivate those particular qualities, then we will become enlightened or awakened ourselves.
Mm. So, what are these eight? Isn't it eight that you speak of in the book? Eight qualities of wakefulness?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously more than eight. I think in one of my academic papers, I specify 24
Oh,
qualities of wakefulness. Well, I'm, I'm not going to go through all 24.
no, thank you. We're going to go, ooh, that's too much.
Yeah, but I focus on eight specific ones, which I think are the most important. And these eight qualities are so important that they kind of give rise to other qualities. They're like the primary qualities of awakening, which give rise to lots of others. Yeah, I'll briefly go through them. The first one is disidentification, which means realizing that you are not your thought mind. It means
Mm,
finding the space between you and your thought mind. The next one is gratitude,
mm,
which means overcoming the taking for granted syndrome, no longer taking our blessings for granted, being aware of the gifts that we have all around us. The third one is presence, or freedom from time,
mm,
which means living in the moment rather than in the future or the past. The fourth one is altruism, giving to the world rather than taking from the world. Then there is acceptance, which means becoming one with the reality of our lives rather than resisting the reality of our lives.
mm,
The next one is integration, which means integrating with the body, being aware of the sacredness of the body and living in harmony with the body. And then the seventh one is detachment, which means no longer depending on external things for our identity or our well-being. And finally, the eighth quality I focus on is embracing mortality, which means being aware of the reality of our predicament, as temporary, living in this temporary, fragile form, and being aware of the preciousness of life.
mm, mm. All these fundamental qualities, if any of them are lacking in our lives, I'm certain, that's why I have this podcast as well. And that's why you're writing this book. We have trouble. Embracing is the word that comes to mind. Embracing all of these qualities in ourselves. With so much distractions that we look at the world at this moment, look at social media, look at
Mm.
everything that's going on. What can we do to start embodying these eight qualities? Like practical tips and tools.
You're right. I mean, I think social media is a big problem in particular in relation to presence. A lot of people find it difficult to be present because there are so many sources of information streaming towards us, streaming to our minds. There are so many distractions, so many temptations. If you feel even slightly bored, you can just open up your computer or look at your phone. And children in particular grow up in a world of social media. So all of these things make it more difficult for us to be present. But I think once you have an experience of presence, and we all have experiences of presence from time to time, we realize that there's a sense of coming home. There's a sense of, this is how easy and natural life is meant to be. It feels so right to be in presence. And one thing I notice is that a lot of people nowadays find meditation quite tricky in the beginning because their minds are so restless and there are so many sources of information. They find it difficult just to switch off and slow down and enter into their own being in a state of quietness. So I often recommend to people that maybe in the beginning you don't need to sit down to meditate, but there are lots of meditative activities or exercises you can do in your life to promote a state of inner quietness or to slow your mind down. So I recommend meditative activities like running, swimming, walking in the countryside, you know, psycho spiritual exercises like yoga, tai chi, but even things that we don't consider running or swimming meditation, but they are a kind of meditation. I've met many people, and I love running, so I get this experience a lot of myself. Many people say that they love running because it slows their minds down, it empties their minds, they feel a sense of connection to their surroundings. So it's a kind of meditation. Swimming is the same, walking in the countryside. So you need to integrate these kind of meditative activities into your life. And once you're aware that your mind has slowed down to a certain degree, then you can sit down and engage in regular meditation, and you'll find it wasn't as tricky as it was in the beginning.
Mm. I so agree with you when it comes to moving your body, your physical body. In the beginning, if there's a lot playing out, it really is for me. I am like you. I love running. It really calms my thoughts down. But not only that, it comes to a point where my body, I can become aware that my body is doing its proper job, and I'm
Yeah.
focused. I am so much more than the body. The body is just doing it, and I just have, I'm opening up. I have these drop-ins of inspiration. Like you said, you have a line for your poem, something happens. There's a lot of magic that happens when
Mm,
you're in that state, or at least that's my favorite state. Even if I go to work out and I run on a treadmill, it's like I have my headphones on and I'm in that space. A lot of people listen to upbeat music. I listen to meditation music sometimes,
yeah.
or audiobooks, where people, spiritual audiobooks, whatever. I feel like it it bypasses some of my critical mind.
Yeah.
So can
Definitely.
you elaborate on that? What is the meditation process and what it helps us to open up, to become aware of?
The great thing about the body, the body can be a great tool of meditation, a great aid to meditation, because the body is always present. Our minds can be chattering away about the future or the past. We can be immersed in activities or distractions, but the body is always here and now. It's always in the moment. It can't be anywhere else because otherwise we wouldn't be alive. So in that sense, all you need to do to become present is to give your attention to your body, whether it's through running or swimming or sport. I love to play sport, which is also very meditative. So as soon as you become present in your body, as soon as you become aware of your body, then you transfer your attention away from your mind. Your mind begins to slow down. You become aware of the energy of your inner being, which flows through the whole of the body. So there's a sense of expansion and a sense of wholeness, which is exactly what we get from meditation. So I mean, I,
Mm,
I love formal meditation too, which is probably the single most effective way of moving towards wakefulness. That
mm.
but there are lots of other activities too which have a similar effect.
Well, when you're speaking, I'm reflecting a little bit because I'm thinking about, yes, the tuning into your body. Of course, the body, it's the embodiment, the alignment. We need to accept all parts of us and to be in alignment with that. But many people, and I've been there myself, and I keep working on that, have issue traumas that is sitting in our bodies now, right?
Mm,
We feel stomach pain, we maybe create a disease, and we don't like our bodies.
mm,
We are actually afraid of our own bodies. So how can we
yeah.
get past that? Please help.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very pertinent point. Well, it's a matter of acceptance. This takes us into the quality of acceptance. There have been a lot of interesting findings about the effects of mindfulness on pain. And normally, when if you have pain in your body, if you feel any pain or discomfort in your body, your instinct is to either push the pain away or to run away from the pain or to mask the pain, which is entirely natural. But research has shown that the best way to deal with pain is actually to be mindful of it, to move towards it, to allow yourself to become one with it. And I mean, I use this a lot because my wife has migraines. She has really awful migraines sometimes. So we have a practice where she moves towards the source of the pain and she allows the pain to sort of seep through her whole being. She allows herself to become one with the pain. And in that process, the pain dissipates. It kind of spreads. It's no
Mm,
longer acute in a certain point. It just spreads through her whole being. And it seems to become soft and numb. It fades away. And that applies to any issue, any physical issue. I know. I mean, I don't know. Sound trite about it because I know it's very difficult to do, and that's why there are lots of therapeutic practices which are based on acceptance. Like acceptance and commitment therapy, for example. Yeah, and the basis of that therapy is that you allow yourself to experience the pain or the trauma of your body in a comfortable and safe setting, and in the act of accepting the pain or the discomfort or the trauma, then it begins to fade away because you're no longer resisting it. You're no longer creating a conflict between you and your body. There's no duality between you
mm.
and your body. So acceptance is really important.
Let's call it radical acceptance because it can
Radical.
be really
Yeah,
radical for people with pain.
yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that actually makes me think that when we carrying everything in our bodies, right? Like all our memories and previous experiences, and one of those points or the 8 qualities that you said was detachment and detaching from past memories. Or what do you mean with detaching? Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, detachment is it's often a sort of a slightly misunderstood quality. But what I mean by detachment is that in normal life, we derive our identity from external things. We derive our identity from our possessions, from our achievements, from our status and success, and from our beliefs about the world, political beliefs, religious beliefs, our ambitions for the future, and so forth. Or maybe we derive our identity via our attachment to other people. Um, but and that's fine to an extent because that gives us a strong sense of identity. It enables us to function in the world. But one of the problem with attachments is that they create a kind of superficial and even a false sense of identity, which is not our authentic self.
Yes.
You are not the person who has become successful and owns all these possessions, and you're not the person who has a certain role in society. You have an authentic essence, which is much bigger and much more fundamental than that. And a lot of people find that, particularly as they get older and sort of enter middle age, they feel that something is missing. That they feel that they've become separated from their authentic self. When people talk about a midlife crisis, that's what it essentially.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm just, yes, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, you have a feeling that something's missing, something's not quite right, because despite all your possessions, despite your professional success, something's missing. You've become separate from your authentic self. And so, I mean, all spiritual traditions focus on the importance of stripping away these attachments and finding an authentic identity which doesn't derive from anything, which just exists within us, a
Yes.
sense of inner wholeness, an essential kind of essential core self. So what I mean by detachment. Dissolving all of the external attachments and realizing our authentic, gaining contact with our authentic self.
That actually makes me think again because I so agree with you. And um, knowing that you've played this story or you've had this identity, right? This false identity, and you play this story so many times, and your environment, family, friends, relationships, they're all used to you being in a certain way. And here you go having a spiritual awakening. And then they go, "What's happening? I don't like
Yeah,
what I'm seeing." How do you deal with that? How did you deal
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah, it's a very good question because the only sort of negative aspect of spiritual awakenings is that they can, cause divorce or break up friendships. And sadly, that often happens because if you think about it, it's kind of obvious. And if somebody undergoes a transformation, they become a different person. So the person, your partner, is no longer together with the same person. They're together with a new person. They're thinking, who is this person? This is not the person I married, or whatever. So yeah, and same with friendships. I've met many people. They've undergone a spiritual awakening, and their old friends are thinking, "Who is this guy? Has he gone crazy? Has he been taking psychedelic drugs? He's not the same person. Not the same person I used to know." Another woman I interviewed. She had a spiritual awakening after she was diagnosed with cancer, and she changed everything. She realized that she'd been a slave to her husband and her family, and she'd sort of been living for other people. So she said, "No, I'm going to live for myself now. I'm going to do all the things that I always wanted to do." So she wrote down a bucket list of all the things she wanted to do. She stopped working for her husband's company. She started traveling on her own and, going on adventures. And her family were like, "She's being so selfish. What's wrong with her?" But she was just living authentically. So yeah, it can cause issues, but that's right. People always gravitate towards new partners, new friendships. So it doesn't, in the end, it doesn't cause any difficulties.
No, and that makes me also think about the oneness of everything, that when you start practicing self-love, which I define this as practicing self-love, taking care of
Mm.
yourself, taking care of your energy, and when you find that peace within, that stillness, that is what you're sharing with the world. So a peaceful heart makes peaceful
Yeah,
decision, brings peace into the world and communities and so forth, right? But
yeah,
within that heart vibration that I like to look at it, that's when everything is one, where we never do feel separate from anything, right? So we're all
right.
feeling the oneness, and in that we are safe and secure. We're feeling loved without maybe in our circumstances at the moment we're experiencing that, but we can still feel it, correct? Is that
Mhm.
that affects us, right? In the mind, the body, it's all about the alignment of that, the connectedness, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
it's a
how do we sometimes it's hard to find questions in this topic because it's such a
we're
topic
going.
that you sit in stillness and you kind of,
Yeah, it's beyond words, really, isn't it?
yes,
Language
it is.
language wasn't really devised to describe these kind of states and experiences.
No, but I
It's like
really want to
poetry.
like dive into this because I think it's important for people who's now sitting there saying, well, yeah, I probably had an awakening, but understanding that you are never alone through what you're saying, even though the physical external environment is shifting with you as you are
Yeah,
transforming who you are through your vibrations and energy, you know, what you're experiencing will reflect your reality, but it's a delay,
yeah.
right? In our physical the way we live our life as human beings. Can you say something about that? How can we expect, or when do we see it in our reality?
Well, you have to trust that it will manifest itself, and it always does manifest itself, and it always changes our lives for the better. But it's very organic and spontaneous. You can't control it consciously. But it's a question of harmony. If you're living in harmony with yourself, if you're living from your authentic self rather than from a kind of socially conditioned identity, then that harmony manifests itself in every area of your life. It manifests itself in your relationships, in your profession, in your behavior. I mean, well, one of the most common traits of spiritually awakened people is altruism. There's a shift. I describe it as a shift from accumulating to contributing. So the main aim of people's life is no longer to accumulate possessions or achievements or success. It's to give to the world, to contribute to the world, to help the human race, to help their communities. So that's a major shift that happens.
Yeah.
Another major shift is that people, you know, sometimes for the first time in their lives, they begin to relish solitude and inactivity, which for most human beings, solitude and inactivity are uncomfortable. A lot of people don't enjoy being alone or
Mm,
having nothing to do, which is why the world is in such a crazy state because people can't stop doing things.
mm.
But after spiritual awakening, people really relish being alone. They find it really, you know, really harmonious to be alone and to be in the moment, to enjoy their experience in the moment.
Mm.
And they really enjoy doing nothing. They really enjoy just sitting or lying down or walking, doing nothing in particular, because again, it allows them to savor being.
Mm.
So we step out of a mode of doing into a mode of being.
Mm. I'm just reflecting again because I love what you're saying, because it makes so much sense when I'm looking at what we do naturally as human beings when we want to clear our minds, when we want to get out of, if there's a chaotic tension in the home, there's stress, and we want to get out, we just want to breathe and go out in nature.
Mm.
We do that in solitude, to kind of clear our minds. And the only one who can walk with me is my dog because she's just unconditional love. I said, well, she can go for a walk. If anybody else wants to go, no, sorry, you have to walk your own path. I'm going by myself. But that
Yeah,
really does use so much more enjoy. At least I do. I see and sense my senses strengthen, to be honest, when I'm not being bombarded by
oh yeah,
external forces other than nature's natural organic way of being, where I can become one with that, where I can
yeah,
feel and be part of the elements, and just allowing yourself to just, yeah, just be. But it sounds
yeah,
so easy when we're talking about it, but I'm saying it took me a long time. It's always natural in us, but it's to understand how important that is for the
yeah,
human aspect of me. And
yeah,
it's
you're
not
right.
selfish. It is what is needed for me to show up as a good mother, as a good wife, as
Exactly.
a whatever.
Yeah.
I want my best values coming forward. I need to replenish
Mm,
myself
mm,
and my energy. And like you said, look at the turbulent energy out in the world. It's because we throw our energy out there because it has to be, we have to be in motion, right? Otherwise we cause disease. So we throw our negative energy, if you wish, out into the world, not knowing that,
mm.
well, I should take responsibility for this. I should look into
Yeah.
this. How do I show up? How am I
Mm,
now affecting my husband, my children? Just being aware, present. So,
yeah.
what is your, let's take it into an environment. You're at a workplace, you're not feeling well, you're not where you're supposed to be, there's an inkling you want
Mm,
something more in life, but you have no clue how to become clear, how to take the next step. What would you
yeah.
say to these people?
Well, I would say that silence and solitude are a spiritual practice in themselves. If you feel like you're bombarded with stimulation, there's too much activity, too much noise around you. We as you say, we all feel an impulse to get out of those situations and to retreat into ourselves. So periods of silence and solitude are really important as a spiritual practice. So I often say to people that you need to, if you have a kind of a weekly schedule, you need to have a few periods of silence and solitude in your schedule every week. Maybe 3 afternoons or 3 periods within a week. Periods where you just switch everything off. um, you don't do anything. You don't speak to anybody. You just listen to the silence around you, and you just allow your being to gather itself and to recharge itself. And I do that myself, and it's really effective. You know harmony is natural to human beings. We have a natural state of harmony within ourselves, so we just need to allow that harmony to manifest itself. And you need to retreat from activity and noise in order to allow that to happen. So if you do, have a period of silence and solitude, that rebalancing will naturally take place. You will return to your natural harmony. Oh, or alternatively, you can spend time in nature, preferably alone or with your dog, because
Mm,
that has the same effects. Nature rebalances you. It puts you back into harmony with yourself.
mm,
I sometimes, on the subject of dogs and cats, by the way, I've got two cats. I think that's also one of the reasons why we love pets, because they also have that effect. Dogs and cats, they exist in a state of natural harmony. They don't have these crazy chattering minds that are thinking about the future or the past or thinking, oh, all the things I need to do today. They're in a state of mental quietness all the time, a state of inner harmony. So I think we love to be with dogs and cats because we kind of touch into that through in their presence. They share their harmony with us.
Yeah, when I look at my dog when she's resting, she can sleep a lot. And when
Oh
she's
yeah.
resting, I'm like, she's so quiet. She's so tranquil. She's just laying there. And I'm like, oh, wow, that is just laying her head down and just being quiet. It's not like she has to
Oh,
go through a process to
I know. Yeah.
breathe and to get down. She's out of it. I love
Yeah.
that.
I see it with my cats. They're just so empty. Their minds are just so empty and quiet.
So, what needs to happen, Steve? What needs to
Mm.
happen? How can we, through spiritual awakening, how can we move this along?
Hmm. There's actually a very strong connection between childhood and spiritual awakening. And it kind of, you know, children are actually, as you've kind of implied, children are actually highly spiritually developed people. So in our society, we have this idea that children are kind of inferior, they're kind of maldeveloped, and we need to develop them into adults. We need to give them learning, teach them so that they can become proper human beings. But actually, it's kind of reverse. We actually lose a lot. Children are actually superior to us in many ways, and we lose a lot of their innate spiritual qualities. So yeah, I think we need to revere childhood rather than thinking of it as a kind of undeveloped state. I used to think of my kids, specifically when we had our first child. So it was my first experience of parenthood. I became aware that my son, he was naturally spiritual. There's so much about him that he was shining with kind of spiritual radiance, and I used to think of him as my mindfulness teacher
Yeah.
because you know we'd be walking somewhere. It'd always take a long time to get anywhere because he was always stopping, as children do. He was stopping to look at
Yeah.
leaves or to gaze in different directions, to look up at the clouds.
Yeah.
And I thought, at some point, I'm going to join in. I'm not going to tell him, come on, we need to get moving. I'm just going to join in. So I started to look at leaves and at the clouds and at the bushes and the trees, and it was great. I was having like my own mindfulness practice. So children, they do have these natural spiritual qualities like presence, and they're also detachment. Children are not attached to anything. They don't care about possessions or success or beliefs. They don't have any beliefs. They just exist in the moment. And they don't have a sense of separation. They are totally connected to the world around them, totally connected to other people. So yeah, I think we need to realize that there's so much we can learn from children. But unfortunately, at the moment, we kind of, we condition them out of that state. We encourage children to let go of that sense of beauty and wonder. We encourage them to switch off to the strangeness and beauty of the world. Whereas, we should try to recapture that, and we should try to cultivate it.
Mm. I know there's a lot of wonderful teachers out there that have had their spiritual awakening and understand this so deeply. I've spoken to many of them in Norway actually, and I know that they do the best they can within the system. Let me say within the system. So the system is so outdated, and it is not. That is why, at least in Norway, we see a lot of drug use by children. We also see a rising of mental disease. What can we do? I feel like it's so hard for us sitting and we do that. And when I spoke to many of these teachers, they say, we can do this, but let's not speak about it with the principal and other teachers, because if we do, we speak in these terms, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job.
Mm. Yeah, I'm always
So I'm
afraid
like
that I'm
frightened. We're like fear based all the time. When are
gonna.
we going to move out of that?
Yeah. It's funny because I've met many, I'm a psychologist. One of my roles as a psychologist at university, I've met lots of academics who say, I've always been interested in spirituality and paranormal phenomena, but I've never spoken about it because I fear that I'd lose my job.
Mm.
It's such a shame, but unfortunately that's true. So, I mean, I don't care. I always think, if I lose my job, so what? I don't
Yeah,
care.
that's us. We don't care.
No. And I think, as long as you're honest and authentic, then everything works out.
Mm.
But, I think there are so many social problems, and, our attitude to children is just part of that. Our attitude to children really stems from the same issue, the same problem as our attitude to nature,
Mm.
our attitude to other groups of people. They're all kind of rooted in the same fundamental issues, which are a sense of separation, a sense of fear and anxiety, a sense of over competitiveness. So I think I'm a great believer that the human race is undergoing a natural spiritual development. I believe that it's part of the evolutionary process that the human race will become more conscious and will transcend discord and separation and move towards harmony. It may appear naive when we look around us at the world. There's so many issues in the world, but I think there are many signs that the human race is undergoing a natural spiritual awakening. Very slow, and there are lots of forces which try to impede it. But
Mm.
I think we definitely are. So as that awakening manifests itself more fully, everything will change. Our attitude to children will change. Our attitude to nature will change. Our relationships with one another will change. Global conflicts will begin to fade away. So, overall, I am optimistic for the future.
I'm so glad you said that. I am too. But when we go dive into this and we're sensing it, I do feel sometimes as a human being that I wish I could do more. We want to
Yeah.
serve more. We want to do more. We want to bring this message out. This is my inspiration for networking with people like you and,
Mm.
sharing unity consciousness and bringing this out into the world is, of course, I want to do my part. And I think as more people awaken to what their part is, serving, sharing their gifts, standing up for what they think is, or they mean is their truth, being authentic, and then coming together in the universal truth. I say love is always the answer. The
Mm.
power of love is to me always the answer. So if I'm not coming from a state of love, then I'm going to put it aside. It has to come from a pure state of love. And so
Yeah.
hopefully we can discuss this as, and I get emotional because it's my human self. I do care. I think it's
Mm.
important that as a spiritual human being that we are showing our emotions, showing that this is not okay. We should awaken. We should not just be in a blissful state all the time, but to work hard for what we believe is the best for humanity, for Mother Earth and all her creatures.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like people need to be shooken a little bit. Like this is such an important thing, and we have to show emotions to
Mm.
to be passionate. I think the passion part is so important, don't you think?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, we live in cultures where emotion is kind of denigrated, and young people, particularly young men, are taught not to show emotions. That was certainly the case in England over the past few generations. I was brought up to be, to not cry, not to show any emotions, not even to show people that I love them, because it was kind of weak to show love. It was kind of
Yeah.
unmanly to show
Yeah.
love. But I think even that has changed over the past generation. I think children are brought up now. Children do tend to be more emotional now. Particularly, I've noticed it in my kids, my boys, and their friends. They're a bit more feminine in a traditional sense. That they do allow their emotions to express themselves. They're not cut off from the feelings in the way that people were taught to be when I was young.
Mm.
So I think even that's. I mean, I see it in my students at university too. That they seem to be more aware of the world, more connected to the world, and have a deeper passion to improve the world.
Yeah, I
So
see
that
that too. Mm.
yeah, so that's a good sign.
Yes, it is. It's a very good sign. Well, time flies, Steve. I would love for you to share some inspiring words to kind of get us back into the wholeness of everything, the connectiveness. So we end on this positive love vibration. And I want you just to, whatever comes to mind, whatever you feel called to share, if it's from your book, if it comes from your soul, if you want to read a poem, you are free, my friend, to do what you feel would be beneficial for all of us?
Okay, maybe I'll read a poem because we've talked about the importance of stillness and quietness, and another thing which is really important is slowness. Living slowly, because our cultures encourage us to live quickly, to do as many things as we can, to achieve as many things as we can, as quickly as we can. But when you slow down, it allows you to be in the moment. It allows you to save a life and to be aware of your blessings. So I'll read a short poem called "Slow Down." Slow down. Don't be so desperate to reach the future that you push the present away. Treat each moment with respect, as a friend who deserves your attention. Greet every new experience as a guest who's welcome to be part of your life. Slow down and feel how the stress of doing turns into ease of being. Slow down and feel how your rigid separateness softens into spacious oneness. Slow down and see how the future fades like a mirage, how the present arises around you as clear and fresh as dawn.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Steve. That was beautiful, beautiful. I felt that. We need to slow down. That's a very good ending, actually. Very good ending. It just made me think that personally, the time aspect, that we're always running around, always running to the next moment, running to the next moment, the next thing that needs to be done. But just
Hmm.
take a breath and slow down and be present and invite that present moment in as a good friend. I like that. Wow, thank you
You
so much, Steve, for for sharing your wonderful book with us, but also for sharing all your gift with us and for reading this beautiful poem and gifting us that. It's been truly amazing and inspiring to have you join me here on the Spiritual Quest podcast. And
Thank you.
to everyone who would like to learn more about Steve and his wonderful work, and I do know he has some great, exciting things on his website, then I will make sure that all his contact information is in the episode description. So all you have to do is just click in the episode description, and all of Steve's information will be available to you. Once again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and joining us for this episode. I wish you all the best, sending you much love and light from me, your host, Vibeke Garnos, always guided by spirit. Bye now.